Welcome back this morning. I'm Steve Botari. Since the Office of the Child Advocate was created back in 2018, we have the opportunity each year to get a look at what the biggest concerns are when it comes to children's health and well-being here in New Hampshire. And coming out of COVID, there is a lot to go over, considering a lot of the old issues still remain and now new ones have emerged. So joining us this morning is the state's child advocate, Cassandra Sanchez. Cassandra, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with COVID. Of course, this has dominated the conversation when it comes to kids, mental health, and health over the last few years. Are children still dealing with the fallout from shutdowns and all that missed school?
Yes, we're seeing a lot of that in the complaints that we get into our office and in reviewing the children in need of care of residential placement that are in the care of the state. We're finding a lot of high needs in children requiring intensive mental health support services. I apologize. So we're seeing a lot of high needs in children and a lot of intensive support services needed at this time. The state has done a wonderful job in providing additional support services through the children's system of care. But given what we're seeing with the workforce, which was highlighted in the annual report this year as a major concern, is that although the services are in place, they're unable to be fully staffed. And given that, children aren't receiving care in a timely fashion. And what that leaves us with is with children with higher acute needs. They end up in emergency rooms. They end up in need of Hampstead Hospital stays to be able to stabilize and return to the community.
Yeah, I want to talk about the mental health and boarding situation in just a few minutes. But getting back to your annual report, when it came to COVID, one of the things you pointed out is that when you asked kids, what they were concerned about, what they were dealing with, it was this notion of getting back to school, getting back to regular life. How is that manifesting in kids here in the Granite State?
Yes, we heard a lot of concerns and increased anxiety from children about having to return to the school setting, fear about what the social situations would look like, managing the schedules that they previously had but had taken some time away from. A lot of stress, but increased angst. And so we see that through anxiety, and for some children, especially those who have complex trauma histories, we see that through trauma-reactive behavior.
And so let's talk about the mental health care system for the Granite State. For young people specifically, do we have enough clinicians? Is it an opportunity for folks to get in there if they need help, or are there these waiting lists still?
There are lengthy wait lists at all levels of care. So we're talking about the community mental health centers that offer therapy. We're talking about the higher intensity services that will go into the home. There are wait lists for those as well. And then include all the way up to the residential care. And we're seeing that there are some direct care staffing issues at these programs. So they're unable to fill all of the beds that they have available because they don't have the staff ratio appropriate to meet the needs of the children. So it's hitting us at all levels of mental health care right now for children.
And you mentioned just a few minutes ago the children who are actually staying in emergency rooms. Essentially, there are no beds available for them to go elsewhere, so they're having to stay in the emergency room, which is, I imagine, is not a place that if you're going through a mental health crisis, is probably one of the worst places to be. There's constant things going on. You can't really get sleep that much. So what needs to be done when it comes to that aspect, and how many kids are we still seeing that they end up in the ER in this boarding type situation?
Yes, absolutely. And to add to what you noted, we also see concerns with education for children in this setting. They're not necessarily being educated during that time, or the schools are doing their best to scramble and try to create a plan, but that will leave weeks in between where children aren't educated. And so they have days where they're just sitting in an emergency room, not entertained by anything, which then, as I'm sure you're aware, any form of isolation is only going to further increase the mental health needs and increase their difficulties of staying in that setting and learning how to stabilize. So we're seeing continued mental health needs in that way, where children are unable to manage that setting and potentially could either increase their symptoms and lead to aggression. For others, it may be parents deciding that they want to take their children home because they're seeing that setting is exacerbating the problem as opposed to alleviating their concerns. So we have children who will leave the ED before they even get any support services. And others are continuing to have lengthy wait times in the ED awaiting to get into Hampstead Hospital because they are filling all of their beds. But because of the high needs of children, they're not able to move them out back into the community as quickly. And it takes the supports on all ends of the mental health spectrum to have those community-based supports available and ready to take the children when they're ready to discharge from Hampstead Hospital for them to be able to sustain. So it's, one side feeds into the other. We need children to have the support in the community so they don't stay at Hampstead for very long, so that the others can get in. And what we're finding is a bottleneck on all angles.
And for parents or caregivers, I mean, just to think that they are bringing their child to the emergency room to get care. Obviously, there's a crisis there occurring that they feel like they need that level of care. So these are families in tough situations already.
Absolutely. And that's what we hear from. We hear from parents that are in crisis that are saying, I brought my child here because they were unsafe at home and they were vocalizing the need for help. And so I tried to do the right thing to get them help, and I feel like I'm not helping my child.
And so we've been reporting pretty consistently on the need for mental health care and more here in the state. You talked about the hospitals being full for inpatient care, also waiting lists for outpatient care. So what's causing the acceleration of cases beyond just COVID? Is this just the way of life now, or is this really just a symptom of what we went through the pandemic?
I believe a lot of it has to do with COVID. We also, the state was growing the mental health system during that time frame, and so it's a really hard time to grow that, to bring in new people to the state who have the appropriate education to be able to meet the needs of the children. We need higher level clinicians, we need therapists, psychiatrists. Our state is in grave need of psychiatrists, and so that's really specific training, and it's a very skilled position, and so we need competitive pay to bring them here. But to be doing that and building up the system during a time of COVID where there's uncertainty and what's going to happen next, it's hard to build up in that time. So I do believe the impact on the system with COVID, as well as the rising needs of COVID, it's all happening together. And then we have across the board workforce. We talk to neighboring states and we hear the same. Workforce in this area is struggling. Mental health supports, some state positions even across the board are really struggling to fill those who are in social services. And if that exists here and nationwide, and we don't have the ability to resolve it, we could see further lack of treatment for children.
And now I know you can't talk specifically about cases of alleged child abuse, so I'm not going to ask you any details about specifics, but I do want to talk in generalities here, because I know this is one thing that your office looks at closely. We saw that case recently of a child allegedly beaten and burned to death by his father. His mother says he was in the system with DCYF, so this would make now 2 other children who were killed in the last year allegedly at the hands of their parents in this state. Are there systemic failures still happening at DCYF that your office is seeing?
I think there's always room for growth when we're talking about child welfare. Unfortunately, this child welfare in general is set up to be a reactive organization, and when you react to child safety, there are times where it's going to be too late. And so we really need to shift towards child welfare as a whole, but especially in New Hampshire, we really need to shift towards getting to be proactive as an agency. And so that's what we're working very closely with the agency on, is how do they plan to get ahead of this. A lot of that does rely on the services in the community. Families may not be meeting the threshold to have an open case per the state law with DCYF, but they can voluntarily agree to work with service providers. And when they have the ability to work with service providers, get care in the home, reduce the stress levels in the home, that's where we see better outcomes for children. Parents who are in stressful situations, which again, COVID comes back into that conversation, right? As COVID exacerbates the stress in the household, parents are going to be more likely to respond more aggressively to their children. So how do we ensure that they are getting the supports that they need, that they understand appropriate parenting, they understand how to respond to their child if their child is in crisis, or if they have a young child who has a lot of high needs? How do they respond to that, or how do they reach out to others within their family system for support early on? And so that's building up the prevention system, and that will reduce these outcomes for kids in our state.
Now, we are still seeing these high-profile, horrific cases of kids, in some cases, who were allegedly under the care of DCYF, or at least had caseworkers, according to the parents. So since your office was created in 2018, are things getting better at that agency, or are there still major room for improvement?
There have been some improvements. There's been improvement to some of the policies, specifically after some of the high-profile child fatalities. So there have been some improvements. I do believe that there's a lot of work to be done there still. And so we work very close with the agency. We do our best to partner with them to work together for those improvements, to share with them our expertise. We have a very different view in looking at cases than they do. We're able to look at them after the fact. It's very easy to say things could have been done differently when you're looking at a case after the fact. And so we're really focusing on looking at taking a step back and looking at the larger systemic impacts. It's often not only that one system that's involved, there may be other systems that are involved, other agencies across the state that are involved. So how can we improve that communication and collaborate better together to improve outcomes for kids? And so I don't think we can point fingers only at the DCYF system, but overall our state can do better for children, and we need to do better for children.
And I did want to ask you about the Sununu Youth Services Center. Just last week, lawmakers decided to keep it open until a new one is built. Previously, they had said they were going to close this thing in really just 2 weeks' time because 2 years ago they passed a bill to come up with an alternative. So is this just kicking the can down the road in your view, and what needs to happen?
I do believe so. I think it's quite unfortunate that they were not able to come to agreement and to consider Senate Bill 1 as it was passed by the Senate that was in front of the House last week. So for myself and others who have been highly invested in the facility, I spend a significant amount of time there, as do my staff from the office, spending time with the children, understanding the programming, what their needs are, and how they're not being met with the current programming. And what was critical in Senate Bill 1 as it was passed by the Senate, it included programming that would start immediately for the children. And it included plans for a replacement facility that is trauma focused. It is a treatment facility rather than a detention facility, which exists now. And so it takes the programming aspect as well as the building to provide true trauma-informed care and reform for these kids. And that's what we want to see. We don't want to see these children end up in the adult system. We want to see them reform, get out into the community, and become productive members of society as adults. And this does not, the decision that came across isn't doing that for children. We're missing the mark there.
And I mean, 2 years ago, the point of having the deadline was so something would happen. Now with this deadline removed, do you worry this thing just keeps getting pushed further and further back with no one making decisions?
Yes, there is a worry that is exactly what happened, because we were here last year. I spent a significant amount of time last year advocating for a replacement to move forward, and that fell through last minute. And so to see this happening again, where there was a push to get a bill passed early in the session that would not only cover pushing out the date, but also what the replacement is going to look like. And so I think all that have been putting in the effort and the time into this were very optimistic that we were going to get to a good place and that we were going to have a bill that would pass. And it feels quite defeating, and it feels like we're really forgetting the children, because if we're talking about extending the date and keeping the facility, we're not talking about what's happening to the children that are in the facility right now. And also the staff. We're talking about a facility that has had this date that they're going to close for years. And so skilled staff have left the facility. There are contract staff that have to fill in. There have been mandates to have juvenile probation and parole officers take overtime at the facility. That does the exact opposite of what trauma-informed care is. It's key to have relationships with these children, get to know them, get to know what their needs are and their triggers, to be able to respond to them if they're in crisis. And when you have staff turnover, or if you have young new staff that don't understand the system that well, or you have JPPOs that are coming in and out, rotating, not familiar with the facility, not familiar with the children, it's going to lead to more chaos in the facility. And when we continue to meet with children, what we hear is that lack of consistency for them is really damaging. They're not getting the therapeutic care that they need right now. They're missing those relationships that they had prior, including an education program that had gone away. There have been some new improvements that have been offered now, but they're missing the key components of the program that existed a year ago. And until there's a promise of a future, I don't see the state being able to hire and retain the staff the skilled staff that they're looking to get in the facility.
We will see what the legislature does this session. All right, Cassandra, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.